got a clock. Now we just need this screen. There we go. Turn off that. All right. I think that we are all... Yep, looks like we're running. Got a bunch of clicking that I'm doing over here as per usual. All right, and I think that's everything. Cool. All right, so good morning. At least around here, over on your neck of the woods, it may be afternoon or evening. It snowed a bit yesterday, but not very much, like maybe a half inch. I think it's in the teens Fahrenheit, maybe, I don't know, something like 18, so it's not particularly warm out. We've got, good morning from New York, Belgium, early Texas, Glossop, UK. I may be mispronouncing that. I'm going to definitely mispronounce this one incorrectly. Carcavelos, Portugal. Parramatta, which is in New South Wales. We've got Portland, Oregon. We've got London, Canada. We've got Belgium, Australia, Melbourne. What else have we got here? Temple, Texas. We have VJ Morph saying good 2 a.m. Adam. We've got Brian Cheney saying good morning from Seattle. Just put together my first Deltoff display case yesterday. Those are surprisingly heavy when they're in the cardboard box, aren't they? I have one in the basement and it's deceptively heavy. Galway, Ireland. What else have we got? Oh my goodness, a whole bunch. Malaysia, Saskatchewan, Turin, Italy, Whitby, UK, South Africa, Buffalo, New York, Czech Republic, Poland, St. Louis, Connecticut, Brunei, Shelby Township, Michigan, Chickasaw Nation Tribal District in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Austria, Vienna, Scotland, Bulgaria, New Brunswick. I saw that moderator Matt was out there, so he's in the Chicago area, which is to say Chicago. Whirlwind says, hey, Adam, building models from the AdMech Battle Force box. A lot to do. Yes, those Battle Force boxes are a lot to do. There's a lot going on in there. Morning from Indianapolis, Athens, Uxbridge, which I may be mispronouncing that. That's in the UK. We've got Bristol, which I'm pretty sure I'm getting right. Brazil, Connecticut. Torch says, does everyone have that same cabinet? Yeah, I mean, honestly, nearly every miniature painter I know, or miniature collector or whatever, ends up eventually with that same IKEA cabinet because it is inexpensive, $60 to $75, I think. If not, maybe cheaper than that, actually. And it's glass on all sides, and it's kind of, it doesn't look like your grandma's curio cabinet. It looks a little bit more modern, and they're great cabinets for. I only wish they had more, shelves. And there's ways you can kind of do that, but that's kind of the thing. Massachusetts, Dorset, Yorkshire, Georgia, 52 degrees Fahrenheit and rain. Well, you guys probably need the rain. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that's more California, really. What else have we got? Phoenix, normally Denver. Games Workshop will phase out Black Templars because they can't trademark Templar. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe. I don't know. I was really bummed because I was a Black Templar fan, and I was very sad in 6th edition, I think it was, when they came out with the Space Marine Codex, and then they had just folded Black Templar into it, which meant that the Black Templar weren't going to be getting a new codex. That bummed me out. So, don't know if they'll do that for that, or if it's just because I get the feeling the reason they kind of folded it back into the main codex instead of having its own separate codex is that maybe it just wasn't selling very well, that kind of stuff. It's hard to say. I mean, really, if it was a situation of not being able to do the thing with the the copyright, then you'd think they would have gotten rid of ultramarines quite some time ago. Because I don't think they're going to be able to copyright ultramarine or trademark technically, because ultramarine blue is a color like that's been around for thousands of years. So, checking in from Amarillo, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona. 20 degrees and snow in Texas Panhandle. Interesting. Huh. Wouldn't think that. Adam Pasek says, I just spilled half of a big bottle of Dracoff Nightshade on my desk. Salvaged like 90% of it. Oof. Yeah, I haven't spilled a wash in quite some time. Knocking on wood. But I did just recently spill an older pot, not the tall pot, but a short pot. I did recently spill an older pot of, it's the darker silver, bolt gun metal maybe, one of the older versions. Now they call it something else. It's right over here. Now they call it Ironbreaker? I don't know, it's dark. Yeah, now they call it Ironbreaker. And so I spilled, it was on a thing, and then I bumped a thing, and then it spilled. Luckily, it spilled onto a napkin, which, could have been way worse. But a good, easily, probably half the bottle, and it was an old bottle to begin with, leaked out. So I tried to paint as many things silver as I could before it all dried. And, yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But that's why I had to buy a new bottle recently. Total Wargamer asks, do you think each demon army will have its own form of gores? Corn gores, slan gores, etc. I mean, that'd be kind of cool. I do like the goat people. They got great faces. And I don't know, they're just kind of neat. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a slim possibility they could make an upgrade sprue where they could, then you could upgrade any of your gores to be specific chaos gods. I could see that. Maybe. It might be more of a Forge World thing. So, because like anytime we say stuff like, well, they'll just make an upgrade sprue. It'd be real easy. They could just do that. But if it's plastic, it's actually kind of expensive. So there's that. Yeah. Clayton says, took your advice, Uncle Adam. Just finished a ton of terrain after I finished making my first army. Working on my Shattered Dominion table now. Well, it's good to hear. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, having decent painted terrain. But again, I used to focus too much on terrain and work and paint it like I was painting a miniature. You know what I mean? Spend a lot of time, lots of washes and stuff like that. And I've found that, like I said in the video recently, it's better to make the terrain not stand out as much as the miniatures. And it also helps speed up the process so you can get to having finished terrain quicker when you just kind of work it over. So yeah, that's worked out pretty well. What else have we got? It's evidently 91 degrees Fahrenheit at 12:30 a.m. here in Central Australia. Yeah, see, that's maybe a little bit warmer than I would generally like, especially at almost a little bit after midnight. Ready to Roll says, using this last every other Sunday show to finish building up the Bestigors and Cygor from the Beasts of Chaos start collecting box, reigning in the new year with chaos. I think that's a good way to do it, definitely. Joshua Daniel Flores says, hey, Uncle Adam, getting anything for 3rd edition Malifaux? More people are getting into it over here because of the game system. I haven't really seen any of the new rules for 3rd edition Malifaux. I mean, I know that they're doing it, but I haven't seen any of the new rules. I did buy a Malifaux miniature at Gen Con, which was the Riot Breaker, that robot with the kind of Gatling gun and the big shield. I picked that up just because I thought it was an awesome looking model, and I definitely wanted to have it. So I haven't built it and painted it yet, but I'm going to at some point. I might just do it just for fun. I might try to make it some sort of display piece. There's not a lot of people in my area specifically playing Malifaux, so I don't know. I mean, if I was to really get the bug and be interested in it, I would have to start trying to teach people to play locally and things like that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I also did pick up, actually, though, some of the new terrain that they've finally produced for I mean, you can use it in Malifaux. You can also use it in the other side, which is the more kind of larger scale battle game that they're designing for Malifaux. But yeah, I picked up some of the plastic terrain at Origins. I think it was at Origins. And just because I thought it was cool and I could use it in a bunch of different situations. I mean, it'll work for, obviously, for, Malifaux, but it will also work for a lot of other games. I mean, technically, I could potentially even use it for maybe Age of Sigmar. I mean, I don't think it would work for games like, say, Wreck Age or, stuff like that, because it's a very, I don't want to say it's steampunk, but it's a little bit steampunky fantasy. So I don't know it would work for games that are supposed to be futuristic. I wouldn't use it in 40K either. But for some other types of games, I think it would work out quite nicely. What else? Atomic Dracula. Hey, Uncle Adam, Kill Team Inquisition rumors have seemed to have dried up. Think we were still getting something? I hope so. In Friday's video, where I talked about things that I'm hoping that we get from Games Workshop in 2019, I mentioned Inquisition Kill Team because I do definitely want something like that. Like I said in that video, in a perfect world, it would be probably a box set like Rogue Trader. So you would get a bunch of cool models and some rules for it. In a less perfect world, it might just be a book. I mean, there's a slim chance they could just say, hey, cool, here's a free PDF, and now you can play with your super old Inquisition models in Kill Team, and it's just a free PDF you can download off of Warhammer Community. I mean, they could do that. They did it basically with Shadow War Armageddon. When Shadow War Armageddon first was released, there was no Inquisition, and then all of a sudden they were just like, oh, here you go, and they just dumped out a bunch of new stuff, which they then wrapped into the thicker Shadow War book. But they could do something like that. I could see, excuse me, for Kill Team, and I would be fine with that. But I would like some new models too. Don't have to. Smokin' Smiley asks, what's with the man behind Uncle Adam? That is right over here. That's Nick Ramondo, and that's my wife's cello case actually, and our friend VJ Morph from Australia sent googly eyes. I was trying to point to the googly eyes with my mouse, but you can't see the mouse. But there's googly eyes on there, and so yeah. Good day to all from Germany. Well, good day. Uncle Adam, do you have a pro tip on painting flesh over Zenithal fast? Need to go through 30 corn, I'm assuming corn instead of thorn, reavers, and it looks daunting. Painting flesh quickly over Zenithal. That's a little bit tougher. Normally when I'm painting like something with a Zenithal, and for those of you that don't know, if you go back and watch a video I did years ago called Understanding Underpainting, which is hard to say, you prime black, and then you prime white. Hang on. So if this is the model, you prime kind of shooting down on it, like from straight down and maybe about as far as maybe like about a 30 to 45 degree angle, depending on how you want it to look. And you don't spray this close. That would be, no. But you spray down on it, and what that does is it gets white predominantly on the top parts where the light would be hitting from the sun, let's say. And so you get a lot of light on the top parts, the tops of the shoulders and stuff like that. And then you get a little bit less, excuse me, you get a little bit less light kind of starting to get into the underarms and in between the legs and stuff like that. And you basically build highlight and shadow just with the rattle can or potentially airbrush if that's what you use. So the benefit to that is then you can use washes and glazes. Like if they're wearing jeans, you can just use a blue wash over it, and it will look like, there's a highlight of light blue in the parts of the jeans that are being hit by the light, and then as that moves towards the in between the legs part where the shadow would be, it goes to darker blue. But in those situations when I paint models like that, when I do the skin, I still have to generally throw down a white brush-on primer on the face, let that dry, then do like a tan or a peach or whatever color I'm going with for the skin tone. So the skin tones in Zenithal are generally painted separately, and they're not washes. Now One thing you could do is if, let's say, they're shirtless and there's a lot of skin, you could just spray a lot more white and then use maybe some sort of skin tone washes for the skin. But I think it might be difficult. I would definitely test it on some other model to see if you can pull it off, because then it could go quite quickly. But you would have to be very careful about making it so that there's not too much, that the skin doesn't get too dark if you're trying to keep like a Caucasian looking person. If you're going with somebody who's a little bit darker skinned or whatever, then you can totally do that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options, but it would take some testing. Generally, like I said, when I'm doing like a Zenithal highlight like that, those characters are probably predominantly clothed. So all I have to really worry about is maybe the hands and the head. But if it's a person who's mostly, like, let's say, shirtless, like a barbarian running around with no shirt on, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, then I may not, I don't know. I haven't tried it particularly, the Zenithal, with a mostly shirtless person. When I did those shirtless corn dudes that were in the original Shadespire box, those guys, I painted their skin tone normal. I primed all of them in a dark red color because that was going to be the color of their like armor plates and stuff. So I kept that. I just primed them with a dark red, like a red oxide from the auto parts store, and then I actually had to paint the skin tones. Throw down like a white coat and then throw down like a flesh coat. And I had some of them that were more dark, and I kind of varied it with washes and things like that and everything. So anyway, long story short, I think it's kind of hard to do with Zenithal, but if you spray them predominantly more white than black, more than I would normally do with Zenithal, you might be able to pull it off if you find just the right wash or glaze or whatever. Ariel Sanchez says, "Hi guys, anyone interested in the Battlestar Galactica Starship battles from Ares Games? Just got the box set and the models are just amazing. This may get me into World War II Wings of Glory." I've played Wings of Glory. We've played it at work actually several times, and I used to play Wings of War, which was the previous version. I used to play that on and off. I've seen the models a little bit, not up close, but I've seen pictures of the models of Battlestar Galactica. I'm interested a little bit more into like what more is going on with the game, but it's kind of, it's an interesting concept, so it'll be interesting to see what's going on. So yeah. Doug says, "Thinking of picking up an Army Painter box set. I currently use craft paint, and I think my skills are hampered by paint quality. Think it's worth it?" Yeah, I think so. I mean, the craft paints that you get like at Walmart or Hobby Lobby or those places, they're very inexpensive, and that's great. They work great for terrain, like especially if you're painting like hills or more organic stuff. But the reason that those paints are generally less expensive than miniature paints is because the pigments themselves, the actual little chunks. Excuse me. I'm just going to try to hang on. Okay. So anyway, the little chunks of color that are inside the paint are generally much, much finer in like Vallejo, Army Painter, Citadel, all those paints that are designed to paint people who are only yay big. It takes more work. It's the process is more difficult to make the pigments that much smaller, grinding, I'm assuming. But yeah, so when you start to paint with those kind of craft paints, there are people that do it. They can paint it and they make it work. It takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more thinning. Sometimes takes more layers, and you'll still get maybe like a chalky, kind of chunky sort of thing going on. So yeah, I would definitely look into a paint set. A lot of times paint sets like that, not always, but frequently they're a good deal in comparison to buying all that stuff separately. But I mean, Army Painter stuff is pretty good. I like a bunch of their washes. Strong tone, soft tone. Some of those are nice. So yeah, find yourself a good deal on a kit, and then start painting with those types of paints, and I think you'll really see a difference. You definitely want to try using a wet palette. I've got a video from years ago here on the channel about wet palettes, one of the more popular ones, so you can find it there. Yeah, so the other big bonus to using paints like say, Army Painter is it's also in dropper bottles. So you only use what you need, and it's just easier to get it onto the palette and all that kind of stuff. Let me see here. Simple green is a great way to strip plastic minis. Yeah, I like that. And what else do I like? LA is totally awesome. That's also quite good. Gaddis Gaming. Hey, Lee, how you doing? What are you going to be doing at Adepticon 2019? Well, let's see. So I'm running 2 seminars, as I have in the past. One is about the more technical side of YouTube, like cameras and microphones and all that shenanigans. And then the other one is more about branding and content and digital strategy and junk like that. And one of them I think is sold out, and the other one's getting close. I just don't remember which is which. I think the branding one had fewer seats left than the technical one, which the last couple of years has not been the case. Frequently, the technical one, people are always like, "Oh, if I can just find the right camera, then I can make a good YouTube channel." Well, it's not exactly the case. So anyway, so that's one thing I'm doing, and then I'm going to be doing some different types of interviews and things like that. I'm going to kind of try to do a video, a little bit like a video I did a couple years ago at Adepticon, where I asked 6 questions of like 7 or 8 painters, and I asked them all the same question, and you got to see all their different answers. I want to do something like that again, but a little bit different this year. And then I'm also going to try to talk to some game designers and do the same type of thing where I ask the same questions and then get different answers. So I'll be doing that as well. And I think I'm going to be doing some other videos, interviewing just other people who are running seminars in the hobby area and stuff. I'm working with Adepticon on that. We're going to be doing that kind of as a promotional thing, because they want to push the hobby seminars, obviously, because I think that amongst all of the conventions, they're the leader in the hobby seminars, and they want to, push that. So, yeah. Excuse me. I was fine until about 2 minutes after starting the video today, and now I got something in my throat. Alrighty. What else have we got? Wargaming Lobby. No, he was answering somebody else. We got Simple Green. We've got links for Adepticon. Keeping it real over here. What else? Hey, Adam, what is your favorite terrainscape to play a game in? I really like playing on desert-themed boards. Well, Tyler, I also kind of generally like desert to some degree, like for bigger kind of, army-style games. So there's the old Realm of Battle board that GW made years ago. It's like a hard plastic. It's 4 foot by 6 foot. It's 2 foot by 2 foot squares. They're modular. You can put them together in many different ways. Maybe if you want a hill in the middle, or if you want kind of like half hills on both sides, or all that kind of junk. And it's the one that has like the cracks in the earth, and then you can see that it's just all skulls underneath the ground, which is, a skull-based planet is, it's rare. Let's just say that. But anyway, so I basically asked for my birthday money from everybody. I was just like, don't get me anything, just give me money. I want to buy this thing. This was years ago. This is 10 years ago almost. So I bought it, and then when we moved into the house and I actually finally had we weren't living in an apartment anymore, I spent a day one summer painting it. So I sprayed it all desert colors, and then dry brushed the rocks and the hills to be a little bit more grayish and stuff like that. So I like deserty themes myself as well. So I still use that table. It'll eventually show up in some bat wraps, I think. Otherwise, I generally like urban stuff. I like that too. So my 2 main kind of realms in that situation are urban and desert. I don't frequently play like on a nice grassy green tree kind of looking thing, unless it's we did a lot of grassy green tree, nice looking kind of European theater stuff for Flames of War. But for otherwise like kind of sci-fi or fantasy stuff like that, it is a little bit more wastelandy. And same with like Wreck Age. You would definitely not have lovely green fields generally, because everything is all screwed up. So there's that. Matthew Sears. No, I'm probably not going to die. I just have a thing in my throat. We had a late night last night. We had all of our group of friends. We had our friends Christmas, or Friendsmas as we like to call it, and so I think I was up too late or something. Maybe I'm getting a cold, but I don't think so. What else? Roll for damage. Coming from a fantasy terrain making background, what's your best advice to bring the models into focus as the star, other than obviously a great paint job? Just getting into 40K. Actually, I made a video about that just a couple weeks ago about how to pick a color scheme for your terrain, and in it I talked about keeping your terrain color scheme a little muted to some degree, so that your models, for the lack of a better term, pop a little better on the tabletop. If you spend a ton of time, on painting your miniature or your building, let's say your ruined building, and you really just make it look like a display piece and it's amazing, then when you put models next to it, they kind of fight back and forth. I also talked about if it's a ruined kind of war zone type battlefield area, everything gets covered in dust from all of the crushed buildings and the broken walls and the explosions and whatnot. Everything kind of gets this sort of gray sort of filter. So, or some sort of, earth tone filter, maybe brown, maybe gray, whatever. So that's why I kind of painted up the terrain. Like if you watch in that video, I've got a bunch of images of terrain that are going to be in the battle reports coming up. And, and so I think that's the way to do it, is to really don't spend a ton of time on the terrain, spend some, do a decent job, but dry brushing, specifically at the end when you're just about done with everything, go through and dry brush everything a little bit gray, and that'll make it look like there's kind of dust sitting on all of the surfaces and the raised surfaces and stuff, and then it just makes it look a little bit more, take a look, go into Google and look at pictures from, bombed cities in World War II or wherever, and that kind of stuff. And you can kind of get an idea for how everything sort of has the same kind of limited color palette after all the dust settles, that kind of thing. So, definitely. Let me see here. MF Dobbing says, listening while finishing some Bulgren off. Watched your What I Want for 2019 vid earlier today. Absolutely agree about GW paint pots. Yeah, I mean, they're iconic to some degree, but they're not great as actual paint storage units. They're okay, but they're not great, and I would like them to be better. And definitely, like I said, like this one's got at least it's fluid, so that's good. But when you take this and you try to put airbrush paint in it, and I'm going to now try to pour this into my airbrush, it's just ridiculous. A lot of people in the comments were like, well, why don't you just use an eyedropper or a pipette? And those people probably went to school for chemistry. Because then I have a bunch of paint that's left inside the eyedropper or the pipette, and then I have to basically just wash down the drain, which with airbrushing is not great, because every little drop is very useful in airbrushing because you can use so little paint to actually paint with, it's not a great solution in my opinion. So that's why I want them to fix it. So yeah. What else? What kind of video editor do you use, says 12 Neef? I started by using, it was originally made by Sony, and it was called Sony Vegas Movie Studio, I think. It was relatively inexpensive as video editing software goes. It was, I don't know, maybe 110, 120 bucks. And I used that for years, and then was going to transition into Adobe Premiere and started messing with it. I took like an online course. I got a good friend of mine who's an editor who I basically paid to teach me. And after about 4 classes with him, and he's a great teacher, don't get me wrong, after about 4 classes, I decided to upgrade to Vegas Pro instead of the Movie Studio one, because I just don't like the way Premiere works. I know it's an industry standard kind of a thing and blah, blah, blah. But long story short is now I use Vegas Pro. Now, Sony doesn't own Vegas anymore. Now it's owned by a German company called Magix, which is the word magic but with an X instead of a C at the end. I still like it, and I think it works very well. The Pro version has got a bunch of features that I didn't have before, which are actually very useful. And it's not crazy expensive, but the downside is that when you're trying to figure out how to do something, like if you're using Premiere, you can go into YouTube and find hundreds of videos about how to fix the problem you're having or how to do something that you're trying to do the way that you want to do it. The downside with Vegas is there's only about like 3 guys that seem to make videos about how to do fancy stuff in Vegas, and it's kind of not, I don't know. Not being industry standard, it makes it a little bit more difficult to get your answers answered, or your questions answered, but it works. So that's what I generally use these days for my normal video editing. I like it quite a bit. Adron says, pipettes are very wasteful. I use syringes, much more efficient. I don't know if I haven't. Yeah, I'd have to take a look at that. Because I could see that being, because you squeeze more out then, and it's got a little plunger. I could see that. I don't think I've ever seen like a syringe that's not for like poking people. Well, I take that back. We had a syringe for giving medicine to one of our cats once. That didn't have a needle in it. I could look into that. Anyway. Uncle Adam, what is that white thing behind you on the liquor cabinet? That looks like it has eyes. They keep following me. I'm not sure. Like this? That's Nick Ramondo. He's not on the liquor cabinet. He's standing in front of it. If you're talking about cells, I don't know what else is up there. He does technically have eyes. Those are googly eyes that are attached to. That's my wife's cello case. Ted says, Uncle Adam. Oh no, that's the one I just read. Sorry. Matthew Sears there with the VegasCreativeSoftware.com. That's a good link. I like that software. And so does VJ Morph. Absolutely agree on Vegas Pro over Premiere. Yeah, I just most stuff from Adobe makes me angry, but I have to use some of it. Royce asks, watched your Friday video. What new IG model besides Soldier would you like? Like the base, box of Soldiers. I don't know. Like, I like the Commissar kind of guy, who's got the plasma pistol and the sword. I modified mine, got rid of the sword, and gave him a big honkin', like a Space Marine sized power fist, which makes him look a little goofy because I would think he'd barely be able to lift it, but I like the way it looks anyway, so I kept it. Technically you can't see that he did. Maybe he's got a bionic arm underneath the sleeve of his big, greatcoat. Speaking of, I guess I'd like to see some greatcoat guys. That'd be kind of cool. But if it was just a specific one-off, I'd maybe like to see another kind of Commissar sort of thing, but has options. Like, I had to kind of get a little creative to modify that kind of Commissar guy to make him not have a sword and give him something else. I'd like to see other options, like a kit, almost like Chaos has a Chaos Terminator Lord kit that is very highly customizable. You can give him lightning claws, which is what Uncle Tickles has. You can do all kinds of stuff you can do. Make him more of a sorcerer lord, all kinds of stuff. But you're putting him in Terminator armor. They're all Terminator. But it's like a $20, $25 box and comes with a bunch of different options. I'd like to see something like that, but maybe for guard, that gives you like a really cool, lots of different options for, heads and weapons and that kind of stuff, legs, all that kind of jazz. I think that'd be kind of cool. B. Mazur says, ask the drugstore for the ones to give kids their meds. Talking about syringes, I'm assuming. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Mike Krubeck says, irrigation syringes wouldn't be hard to find, maybe. Irrigation syringes, that must be a technical term, but it sounds right. A lot of people talking about syringes. Chronic Toast, hey, how you doing, man? Adam, what project are you least looking forward to tackling in 2019? That's a good question. What am I least looking forward to tackling? I don't know. Honestly, the issue I generally have is that I generally want to work on all the projects, but there's only so much time in the day. Um, I don't know. That's a good question. I know I've got a bunch of stuff waiting for me as far as Kill Team is concerned. Like I have Death Watch. They're all built and primed and everything ready to go. I have Tyranids. Looking forward to them. I have Tau, which are built but not textured or primed. I have Admech, which are built but not textured or primed. Maybe. So also for battle reports coming up, and you guys saw it in the terrain video. I've got those made by Secret Weapon Miniatures. They're called tablescapes or tilescapes or something like that, and they're foot by foot tiles, hard plastic, kind of like the Realm of Battle board, but smaller. And those are all painted up now. I've got a roughly 2 by 3 foot area. Yeah. Which I'll be doing battle reports on for Kill Team, because the normal Kill Team is 22 inches by 30, and this is 24 inches by 36, so it's pretty close. That being said, I also picked up the new Realm of Battle board from Games Workshop, which is that big industrial kind of crazy looking thing. And if I just use 2 of those, it'll be 24 by 48, which is also, again, close, but it's maybe a little bit longer than I might like. But they're primed. I'm not looking super forward to painting those. Maybe that's probably a good answer there, because they're big. Like, working with those foot by foot table or tiles, sitting there at my hobby table and painting them, it's not too bad, because they're like, it's right, just this thing about yay big. A 2 foot by 2 foot, trying to hold that and paint it, I don't know that that's going to fit at my hobby table very easily. I may have to paint it someplace else. I'm not sure. So I guess if I thinking ahead, trying to get those things painted to be able to use in battle reports is going to be a pain. Update on the battle report front. My wife and I are going to Lowe's tonight or this afternoon after we leave her parents for lunch, and I'm buying a rug for the battle report room. Battle report room is 9 foot by 12 foot, and it has got a hardwood floor, and it reflects in there, which it's like an echo, basically sound reflection. It sounds like you're in a bathroom. You know what I mean? Like if you ever like talk to somebody on the phone and they're like sitting in the bathroom while they're talking to you on their cell phone, and you're like, "Are you in the bathroom?" Because you can hear the sound reflection. That room sounds like that, which is not great. So try to fix it. And one of the things you do in that situation is put down a rug. So picking up a 8 foot by 10 foot rug and then driving it to the studio and then getting it up the stairs and putting it in that room this afternoon. So that'll help. I'm also working on getting some stuff on the walls that'll also help with the sound reflection. And the microphones that I'm going to be using, I did some work yesterday actually in the studio, trying to figure out what the best settings are to make them not sound terrible. And it's not that they sound terrible, but I was getting this horrible hiss. Like if you just stood there and didn't say anything, there was this hiss that was in the background, and it's because I had the settings all funny. And now I think figured out how to fix that so I can get rid of the hiss. So yeah, hopefully very soon the new battle reports. I was going to film one on the 23rd or 22nd. It was the 22nd. A friend was going to come in and do it, and that's when I realized that there was a host of technical problems, plus that room sounded like a bathroom, and then so we had to reschedule. So very close to being fixed, but we're getting there. Do you think there's a chance to release Tomb Kings again? I'm not familiar with GW politics, but I heard legends about missed Matrix or producing Tomb Kings minis, or about lack of popularity for the army. I don't know that army fits into the current Age of Sigmar lore. You know, you've got an undead army, you've got death. That's a big army in there, but I don't know that the more Egyptian-y kind of ones are necessarily part of the lore anymore. It seems of the 2 death armies from old fantasy, they've focused maybe a little bit more on vampire counts, but not. I don't know. Like right now, they've focused quite a bit on night haunts, which is kind of a new thing. It's skeletons and ghosts and stuff like that. If you remember the old Karen Wraith from old fantasy, it's like they took that one model, which was an amazing model, and then just made an entire army out of it. So there's all kinds of like little spooky boys kind of floating and whatnot and just balancing on one little part of their cloak. And yeah, so that seems to be their big thing these days. So I don't know that there's much Tomb Kings coming back, frankly. Yeah. Let me see here. Dave Rockefeller asks, "Heyo, quick question. What would you think, which 40K system would be the best to introduce someone to tabletop? Must be 40K, he's a big fan of the lower, must have easy rules, not too overwhelming." I'd tell you Kill Team, honestly. If the person's into 40K, but they don't want to jump in full into the whole, thing. I mean, if they absolutely want to play a big army game, then they have to play probably 8th edition. And 8th edition is pretty streamlined and not too difficult to get into. I wouldn't tell them to go into 7th edition, certainly, for lots of different reasons. But if they want to be getting to the lore and play a sci-fi game and go all that stuff, and you're saying that there must be 40K, he's a big fan of the lore, I'd say go into Kill Team. You can get the Kill Team book for like $40 and then buy... I've got a video from a couple months back about how to build a kill team for $50 or less. So there's a bunch of options in that video you can watch, and yeah, that kind of stuff. It's a great start into the system. If for some reason kill team is not the way to do it, then I guess I'd say you'd have to start off with like maybe just playing 500-point games. It's doable. Some armies are way better at 500 points than others, but yeah, that's kind of the trick. What else? Gary Doyle says, "Just spent the last 5 hours putting together Malignants and Night Haunts. Ready for priming? Need alcohol." Sure, I can. It's the season, I don't have any in here. I'm just going to take a drink, but, I can understand that. I had a bottle of wine last night, so it's fine. I mean, not all at once, over the course of the evening. I would probably have a pretty good headache if I drank a bottle of wine pretty quickly. Christopher Dick, hey Chris. Hey Adam and Matt, Merry Christmas and hope your New Year's are great. We know Chris from Milwaukee. He's a good guy. Too fun to stop. They talked about a Realm of Sand a few years back and got everyone excited, but then, much like Skaven, nothing happened. I'm assuming that's related to Tomb Kings, maybe. I could see that. That makes sense. What else have we got here? Question: any advice on non-GW Chaos Marines? The current GW line is showing its age so badly. Well, I did mention in Friday's video that that's one of the things I want them to make new Chaos stuff. Now, some people mentioned in the comments, and this is true, in the new Blackstone Fortress... Yes, in the new Blackstone Fortress, there are 2 or 3 like normal Chaos Space Marines that they're Black Legion in according to the box, but you could probably paint them however you want. But they are bigger, newer sculpt, normal Chaos Space Marines, and they are super cool looking. So hopefully that's maybe a little indicative that down the road we're going to have a new box of Chaos Space Marines. I would really think we would. I would hope that if they do that, they also make a new Abaddon, because Abaddon is old and busted. So, yeah, hopefully you're going to see that. As far as an alternative, geez, maybe somebody in the chat's got something. I don't know. I've not seen an alternative. I mean, like, there's some companies, some of those like kind of resin companies from Poland, like Max Mini or Cromlech or Puppets War. Are they from Poland as well? There's a bunch of companies, Spellcrow. There's a bunch of companies that make resin that are all in Poland, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know what. It's interesting. I mean, they do good work. Like, I don't know if resin is super cheap over in Poland. I don't know how that works, but anyway, the fact of the matter is that some Cybor is another one. They make these models that a lot of them are kind of a bit counts as, and you can use them in games where you can use them in 40K, but I've not really seen a specific like chaos related one that you could use. Maybe like a Chaos Lord, some of them will do that, but like to actually use them as normal line troops, I haven't seen too much of that. So Pushing up the glasses. Hey, Adam, using Lord of the Rings as an example, what other franchise do you think would make a good war game with miniatures? Gosh, well, someone recently was mentioning... It's a loud noise outside. Someone recently was mentioning in the comments that they would like to see... not Shadowrun. Well, Shadowrun's an example, but like a cyberpunk kind of miniatures game, and you don't see a lot of miniatures for cyberpunk stuff too much. I don't know. There's like a slim part of me that thinks that a Blade Runner game would be sort of cool, like a skirmish game, but maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Adam, how do you feel about Speed Freaks? I mean, the models look pretty cool. It's one of those kind of games where it's designed for pretty much like it doesn't fill the Gorka Morka niche because there's just the vehicles. There's not really any just models that you would use. Gorka Morka was an older game made by GW where it was just orcs driving around in trucks shooting at each other, but you actually had to have the orcs in the truck. Like if you had 6 orcs in a truck, you had to be able to put 6 orcs in the truck. Like it was very WYSIWYG that way. And then sometimes the truck would blow up and the orcs would fly out, and then you would have a ground battle kind of more a little bit along those lines, and people would be driving by and trying to run over orcs and stuff like that or whatever. Whereas Speed Freaks is just, it's 3 or 4 vehicles per side, and that's it. You don't get out of a vehicle, that kind of thing. But yeah, so it's, like I said, the models look good. I watched a bit of a battle report. It looks like an okay system. I've not played it. I watched a little bit of, who did I watch? I want to say it was Ash from Guerrilla Miniatures Games. He did a battle report of it, like right when it came out. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of where that's at. So, Nosferatu Jones, which is a good name. RoboCop, that would make an amazing game. Yes. Well, I don't know, because you'd always kind of want RoboCop in it, and then you'd end up having a battle of RoboCop on RoboCop, because, you know what I mean? Like, you need, not in every game, but you need factions in some games. So you'd have, OCP, let's say. You'd have the Detroit police versus, say, bad guys. I don't know. Robbers, whatever, that kind of stuff. That'd be, that's a good question. I mean, I'd like a really nice RoboCop miniature, don't get me wrong. But, yeah. Caleb says, Game of Thrones is a cool war game. Star Wars is potential. I think a larger scale nuclear wasteland like the Fallout skirmish game would be great. I don't know. Like, big battle games that take place in post-apocalyptic don't make any sense to me. Like, one of the things that's great about Wreck Age is that it is small little war bands of people who, and maybe not even war bands. I mean, like, technically the Stakers wouldn't think of themselves as a war band, I don't think. They're just trying to eke out an existence, in what's left of the Earth. And, so it makes sense to have smaller groups. Like, you wouldn't take a game like, say, Wreck Age or any kind of post-apocalyptic game and have huge armies, because that would just be sort of weird. I don't know. It just seems weird to me. But, like, it makes total sense for something like Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. So, I mean, when they made the Song of Ice and Fire game, when Cool Mini did, it made sense that they kind of made it rank and flank, where you've got those, they're all lined up in like rectangles, and you move them as a single unit, and you see all the little pikemen or whatever. But I'm not a big fan of rank and flank style games, so that's one of the reasons why I haven't gotten into it. So, The Chronic Toast. What about a Redwall skirmish army game? Thoughts? I don't know anything about Redwall, sadly. He says it's based on a book series, but I haven't heard of it, so I don't know much about it, sadly. George says, you can have RoboCop. I want Ed 209, basically, which I get that. I understand that. I would like a nice Ed 209 model. That'd be kind of cool. I know I've seen, like, Sideshow Collectibles and stuff like that. I know they've made like probably like a RoboCop and an Ed 209, but and maybe I don't know. Has Bandai made a? I swear I've seen somebody recently painting an Ed 209 like model, like a kit, like it was on sprues and all that stuff, but I'm not sure. Rob England says, "Hey, Uncle Adam, do you think Games Workshop will make more of the resin miniatures into plastic, such as biovores and spore mines?" I feel like their plan is to eventually get rid of resin. I mean, it's not. The thing about resin is, from what I understand, is that it is much less expensive to get started with resin. Making the molds and stuff like that is way cheaper than making a injection molded plastic mold, because those molds are generally made out of steel and can be incredibly expensive to build. But once they're built, you can crank out literally millions, if you want to, plastic sprues for very inexpensively. But there's this huge upfront cost. With resin, there's a much lower upfront cost, but you can only crank through so many times before the mold falls apart, because the mold in a resin situation is actually rubber, vulcanized rubber. And so eventually, like, little pieces of detail start to pull away, and sometimes you get a resin model and there's like a little weird piece of rubber like in the armpit or something like that. Well, that means the next guy that they cranked out had a big weird now chunk of resin hanging out of his armpit, because there's now a void in the mold. So they have to constantly keep remaking the molds, so they're cheaper to start, but they're much more problematic over time. Whereas the steel molds for injection molding for plastics are very expensive to build at first, but then once they're built, you can go for a long time. So it's one of those situations where I think that they have to be able to. It just is it's a money game. Like, once they build them, they can put them on the shelf, the big fancy steel molds, and then crank them out when they need to. The resin stuff takes a lot more time. The reason that Forge World is done in resin is because there's going to be so few people who are going to buy a $2,000 Titan, or whatever, Warlord Titan, that when someone actually goes to the thing and says, "Yep, I'm going to spend $2,000 on a giant robot," and then somebody there at Forge World's like, "Oh crap," and then they have to go make it. So like, they already have the masters, but they probably, if the molds that they have right now are okay, they might be able to just work directly off that mold. But if the last Titan that was made kind of goofed up the mold a little bit, they have to make a new mold off of the masters first, and then actually make your stuff, and then send it to you. So yeah, I don't think we'll ever see any big plastic Titans, obviously, but they would like to be able to go through eventually and replace, I'm assuming, everything that's in the line. Although they've been doing those things. They just had a thing on their website again recently with a whole bunch of like, hey, we'll make this because it's, I forget what they call it, but it's that thing where like they have a bunch of weird models and they'll make them kind of like on demand for like a week. So if you order during this week, then they'll make them and ship them to you. But they're sending them to you in resin, and it's mostly stuff that they used to make in metal. So. What about Starship Troopers, mobile infantry, bugs, and skinnies? I mean, they did that. There was a who had that game? Mongoose? Might have been Mongoose Publishing. Had a Starship Troopers game that did not sell like hotcakes. Didn't work great, and for a long time, you would be at like Gen Con and places like that, and you would see these kind of discount places that would be blowing stuff out, and it would just be piles and piles and piles of Starship Trooper stuff. I think that Mongoose Publishing, if that's who originally did it, which I think it was, I think they thought that game was going to sell way better than it did, and it did not. So they had a ton of product left over, and so eventually they blew it out to discounters and stuff like that. And I bought some of the like infantry models, and they were okay. They weren't great. But I got them for super crazy cheap. So actually the bugs were pretty good. Just like even in the movie now, when you watch it, the CG for the bugs is still not bad for how old it is. But yeah, the models were pretty great, but the infantry models were not. And I don't know anything about the game. I own the book, I think, someplace in the basement. There's a copy of the book that I got for like $3 probably at Gen Con. So. What else have we got? Adam Pasek says The Witcher miniature game might have had potential. Yeah, that could be kind of cool, maybe. I could see that. Mongoose Publishing is correct, according to Ian. So that's, yeah. Adam Punchkey says, with so much GW content being behind paywalls, do you wish that there were more open source resources, for example, releasing a line of 3D printable accessories? I mean, I don't know what you mean by their content behind paywalls. I mean, they sell stuff, I guess. That's, I don't see them. I mean, they do give away some things for free. Like, oh, here's some rosters you can use with our game, and we made them PDF so you can download them. Here's, obviously the FAQs and all that kind of stuff generally are free for the most part. But I don't know what else you're talking about being behind paywalls. They do have, like, if you want to, I know in the Age of Sigmar app, there's like certain battalions and things like that that you have to pay for. But that's just an alternative to buying the book. Because if you just buy the book, well, then you'd have the battalion thing. Like one of the battle tomes, you'd have the battalions for that army in there. And they're saying, well, if you don't want to buy the book, you can just buy them straight through the app. And that's, but you still need to buy them. Is the trick? That's just the way that business works. They got people who have children to feed, and so they do that. And there are people that'll say, oh, well, that it's too much money, or they make too much money. And that's the case with capitalism all over the world in some situations. But yeah, I don't know that they're going to, and I certainly don't think they're ever going to get into 3D printing. I may be wrong at some point, certainly. But GW, like them selling STL files to people, I don't see it happening. They would rather just make the thing in plastic and sell that to you. And but there's plenty of options out there. There's tons of companies that make STLs that you can buy so you can print them yourself. Tons and tons of options. So take a look into stuff like that. Corvus, Imperial Terrain, Fat Dragon Games. Depends on what kind of game you're playing. Those are like the three I can think of off the top of my head, and I know there's way more. I just can't think of them all right now. I've done a video not recently. I did a video between now and last year, I think, that was about 3D printed terrain and that kind of stuff. So David says, what do you think about putting weights under the bases of tabletop figures? I started to do this on my kill team, and they feel much better that way when moving. Yeah, honestly, I've done that pretty frequently. What I've found is that nickels work pretty well, and turns out they cost 5 cents. So that's pretty cheap in comparison to, saying, like buying a washer or something like that. If the model's like a slotted base one, then it's really hard to kind of get something up inside there because there's the plastic bits that are falling, sticking down. But if it doesn't have the slotted base thing going on in there, there's usually space where you can glue like a nickel into it or something like that, and that helps to keep it so that, yeah, because some models are just top heavy because they're just very tall and they'll tip over. I think that's part of the reason, also maybe part of the reason why GW started switching to mostly 32 millimeter instead of 25 millimeter bases, is because it just gives you a little bit more of a foot so that the stuff doesn't tip over as much. Also, I think just like, Necrons used to be on 25s, and it was always, you had basically just had to glue their heels to the outer edge of the thing, and then their toes were always hanging off, because Necrons have got a real problem with like man spreading. They're always got they have a wide stance. But they work way better now on 32 inch or 32 millimeter bases. John Shave says, okay, seriously, move the cello case already. No, that cello case is there all the time. Most of the people who watch the show are fans of Necromunda. And so, yeah, I'm actually working on a t-shirt. So, yeah. Rob England says, are there any companies out that stand out to you for MDF terrain? I really need to flesh out my battle mat. I was going to say secret weapon, but they don't make MDF, I don't think. What's the... it's like a secret weapon. Death Ray Designs. A Death Ray could be your secret weapon. You don't know. Yeah, Death Ray Designs. They make some like kind of ruined sort of office buildings, which are really nice. They make some stuff that, if you're in a 40K, looks very much like if you've played the old Dawn of War real-time strategy PC game. a lot of the buildings that you would build in your Space Marine base, they've got a bunch of MDF models that remind me quite a bit of some of those buildings. One of the things I like most probably about Deathray's stuff is that for the most part, it doesn't look like MDF if you build it right, because they've not just decided to make it like a slot tab sort of a thing. The buildings need to be glued together, but then when you do that, they don't look as much like MDF because they don't have that slot tab. There's more a thing going on. So yeah, definitely I would look into Deathray Designs if you're looking for some good MDF. There are other companies out there too, but that's the one that I think of the most. Like the last 2 conventions I've been at, I've nearly pulled the trigger on some of those ruined buildings, those like ruined office buildings, because they're just really nice looking, but I can't right now think of a great use. Although now that I think about it, just sitting here in front of you guys, it would be good for post-apocalyptic. Because that, yeah, maybe. I think I could see that. So anyway, yeah, Deathray Designs, that seems to be the stuff I like the most, it seems, these days for MDF. George says, now I want to see a 32-inch base to Necron. That would be a very large base. That would be like, you can't even see where my hands are. They're like, this is not even, that's way out there. The Emperor, do you think 40K models are getting too big? They seem to be upscaling a lot of stuff. No, I like the bigger models to some degree. I like the new Death Guard quite a bit. Primaris, I mean, that's the thing, is if those models get bigger, but they don't make the Imperial Guard too much bigger, like if they add new Imperial Guard, it used to be that an Imperial Guardsman was the same height as a Space Marine, and that never should have been the case. Like, Space Marines, when they take their armor off, are supposed to be still 7 foot tall, so they should be bigger. So now if they decide, let's say they make a new box of, like I want, they make a new box of Imperial Guard, and the Imperial Guardsmen are the same height as Primaris, well then that will probably be a little goofy. Like, they probably ought not to do that. But if they keep them normal size that they are now, then when you put them next to a Primaris, and the Primaris is a head and a half to 2 heads taller or whatever, that'll totally make sense. So making the power armor folks larger does not bother me at all, because they should be larger than they've always been. Like a TAC Marine, a normal tactical Marine next to a Guardsman, they look like they're the same guy. It's looked like you just took one of the guys and put him in power armor, and they shouldn't. They should be a good deal bigger. So that's my personal opinion. Yeah. In Kill Team, what has been your favorite faction to build versus your favorite faction to play? Oh gosh. I've been having fun with I was going to say I've been having fun with the Necrons, but that's maybe not true building-wise. The Necrons are like, warriors are getting to be a bit older in the models themselves, and so they are a little hard to keep the arms on when you're trying to like glue everything together. You have to basically like one arm, the other arm, and then the gun, and you have to be able to hold all those things together, and you need like another hand. But I have been trying to make some flayed ones, just completely scratch build some flayed ones, because I don't like the flayed ones models. So I've been making my own, and that's been fun. I've been enjoying that. So there's that. As far as playing, I probably still like my Death Guard quite a bit. They're a lot of fun. I really enjoy that Blight launcher. That thing is pretty baller, in case you're wondering. Jonathan says, I've been trying my hand at wet blending, and I keep turning out muddy models that I'm not happy with. Do you have any tips that may help, or is it more of a practice makes perfect thing? I would definitely watch some of the videos here on the channel from Sam, where he kind of explains it. And I would also say that there's a practice makes perfect sort of a thing. Generally, you're going to get, I don't want to say mud, but you will get a little bit of a mix of the two colors. So if you've got some color over here and some color over here, and you're trying to blend the two of them, you're going to get a mix of them in the middle, which some people will say will be muddy. But it's also, I mean, it depends on what you're doing for the two colors, too. If I'm mixing orange and blue, they're complementary colors. Here comes some art school learning for you. They're complementary colors, which means they're opposites on the color wheel. In a perfect world with perfect pigments, if you take those two colors, a perfect blue and a perfect orange, and you mix them together 50-50, they should make a perfect mid-level gray between the two of them. Because we don't live in a perfect world, they almost never do. They usually make a little bit more of a browny gray, or depending on the pigments and stuff like that, it can also skew a little bit different, but it's usually more of a brown, which mud, frankly. Same with same with green and red, and same with purple and yellow. Those are the three pairs of complementary colors based off of the primary colors and all that kind of stuff. And the secondary colors. Anyway, long story short is that those two colors will always make garbage in between the two of them, but that's kind of the point. Whereas if you're saying I want to go from blue to a lighter blue, and then in the middle turns into brown, then that's a problem that you need to fix. That's not the way that should work. If you're adding white to tint something, or if you're adding a darker color to shade something, and you want that kind of blending to happen, you shouldn't get too much mud, but it does just take practice. Like I do it more often than not when I'm doing any kind of wet blending. It's either trying to like lighten it up or darken it down. So I'm working on something and I'm got it all and it's a certain blue, and now I add a little bit of white to it or something like that, and I'm trying to make it so that it looks like light is hitting the top part but it's fading down to the dark part down here or something like that. That's kind of the kind of wet blending that I'm trying. I still don't do a ton of wet blending. I'm going to be perfectly honest here. It's a safe space. We can all talk about it. But yeah, I don't do as much as I probably ought to try. I'd like to do it on bases more these days, to kind of, like in that video from back in January where Sam, which I'll talk about in a bit, but Sam was painting Shadespire skeletons. Like he was showing that if you make the base kind of lighter towards the front of the base, and then kind of fade to dark as it gets like behind the model, it can put a little bit more visual interest on the model. So when you're looking at the model from the front, the base is lighter in the front, and then if you're looking at the model in the back, it's darker in the back. Not the rim part, but the actual surface. That kind of stuff I think can work really well and kind of add a little bit of visual stuff. And it's way easier in a lot of situations to learn to wet blend on a base than it is, say, on a shield that's like a focal point, or on a helmet, that's on the top of the model, that kind of stuff. But that kind of stuff is the way to work, that jazz. And as Matthew Sears here has posted, you should definitely follow Sam, our friend Painter Sam Lenz, on Twitch. He's at Twitch TV/Samson Arts. Samson like Samson and Delilah, I think, or whatever. Anyway, Samson. So it's Samson, S-O-N, Arts. And that's at Twitch TV. He usually streams on Thursdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Tuesday night too. Wednesdays and Thursdays I think are in the afternoon Central Time. He just lives that way. So yeah. Yes. Grimlock Steve says, why did GW make models with such breakable bits? I'm putting together a Slaves to Darkness box, and those chariot ropes just snap trying to glue them in. I'm just going to get picture wire now. Picture wire will actually work well as a rope in a lot of miniature stuff, because it's wound pieces of much thinner wire. They're trying to make models, I think, that are more dynamic. And in doing that, like if you look at the Night Haunt stuff, there are a lot of tiny little bits in some of that Night Haunt stuff. If you look in Night Vault, the second season or whatever they call it for Warhammer Underworlds, Shadespire, and then there was Night Vault. The models that come in the Night Vault box are also very slender. The whole concept of trying to make this thing look like it's a floating ghost by having it just touching the base by part of its little kind of trailing ghost outfit, whatever you call that, cloak, ghost sheet, makes it look cool. It makes it look like the model is floating, but it's not a load-bearing, like if you then decide, I'm just going to set my coffee mug on top of my model, you can do that with a Space Marine, because they're stocky and thick, but you can't do that with one of those spooky boys, because they will break right off the base. So you have to be a little more careful with them. Like if you made ghosts that were super stocky and thick, they wouldn't look like ghosts. You know what I mean? So it depends on the models, but it is They're surprisingly, I find that a lot of the Night Haunt stuff can take some pressure. They're almost springy, but you too much and they will break. So you do have to be a little bit careful with them, especially the ones that are in the Night Vault box. They have a lot of little rose vine craziness, and that stuff can be a little fiddly. So, what else? Talking about Sam streaming. He streamed last night too. Things are going to change up a bit now that he has a workroom. He's brilliant to watch. Yes, he is very brilliant to watch. Jonathan says, I finally made it down to the Warhammer Citadel yesterday. Very nice store. My only complaint was the severe lack of Middle-earth models, both from Forge World and Games Workshop. Otherwise, a great store. Yeah, I mean, they released the new they released the new Middle-earth book, and they did release a box set, I think. Wasn't that Pelennor Fields? Wasn't that a box set? I think so. I'm honestly a little surprised that they've stuck with it to the way that they have, because I know that there are people out there that are still playing it. Like when I was at the Nova Open, which is when they released the new book, there was a tournament of, I think I was told, something like 70 people that were playing. And I talked to a guy who was very nice, and he said they had quite a large group of people that were still playing it in Canada. I don't remember if he said Ottawa or Toronto or some city, one of the bigger cities. And, and that's cool, but it's just not like you've got, 40K in Age of Sigmar as far as sales are concerned, and then way down, I think you have Lord of the Rings. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. They've released some new things here and there, but it's become probably... It's easily a tertiary line, if not even less than that, for them. So it's interesting. People talking about how elaborate models are great, but hard to put in foam trays. That's very true. I get that. What else? Talking about Nightmare miniatures, my personal assembly... Nightmare is the spirit hosts from Age of Sigmar. Yeah, I got a box of those that I want to add to my Death Army, and I haven't tried building them yet, but they do look pretty fiddly, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, that's a good point. Those guys, like those kind of spirit hosts, are sort of early, almost prototype to the Night Vault, Night Haunt kind of stuff to some degree. I mean, you can see it's interesting to watch these progressions. Like when you go back and look at like the very first kind of like, let's make this was really more for fantasy back before Age of Sigmar, but when they kind of came up with the concept for the Blight Kings, or that kind of whole entire like Nurgle sort of line, I feel like it started with the Lord of Decay, which is that guy on the horse. And he's got the scythe and all that. I've got a metal version that's actually all primed, and I should just start painting it, but I haven't yet. Then they made the Putrid Blight Kings, which are awesome models, still some of my favorites. But before that, they made just the normal Nurgle Chaos Lord, who's got the big axe he's holding in front, and he's got the like entrails in his guts are hanging over the axe. He's basically Old Drippy. He's one of my favorite. And then if you go back and look at the Cairn Wraith, which is also an amazing model that was made originally for fantasy, and that's that ghost kind of guy who's got the scythe and he's like floating just along the tip of his little ghost cloak. They took that model and then just kept going until they eventually made, most of the Night Haunt stuff that you're seeing out there today. And so it's interesting to see, like, they make a model and then they're like, ooh, I like that, and then they kind of go with it. And it's just interesting to see that from a creative standpoint, I think, personally. All right, I should try to talk about a retrospective. How about that? Why don't we try doing that? That sounds like something. So, I have to click on this. There we go. So this, and then I have to do this, and then do that. So this is, hey, you can see the cursor now. Neat. This is this video right here. What's coming up in 2018 for Tabletop Minions Live? That was, I believe, the first video of the year. It was a live show. It's back before I started calling it the Every Other Sunday Show. And talked about a bunch of stuff. Here's how to paint corroded weapons with Sam. So this is in the the kind of the middle of that, going through that Shadespire skeleton set. If you go back actually a little bit into December over here, you will see this is how to wet blend with base coat, which is again talking about what we were just talking about before about wet blending. So if you haven't seen this video about wet blending, here's a good one from Sam to learn about that stuff. Fun fact, on all these videos that I filmed with Sam, they were all filmed in early December 2017. And in getting my stuff out of the car to take into the house, I threw my back out. So the rest of the day, I was like hobbling around like a septuagenarian. And that was fun. So anyway, luckily my back's been really good since then. Again, knock on wood. What else? So we went from the corroded weapons with skeletons, how to paint the glowing eyes. Those turned out really well. Started talking about, I did this video about understanding internet criticism, and this is one of the irregular live shows over here. Got upcoming travels, talk and chat. This is just before me going to my first Las Vegas Open. Sam's Shadespire Skelly sweepstakes, and that was when we gave away the skeleton. I did get a picture finally from the guy who won it. His name was maybe also Sam? I should probably post that, because he did send me a picture to prove that he did actually get it, and I should probably do that. But yes. What else have we got over here? Like, I'm looking for videos that I did over the last year that got a lot of views in comparison to, say, some that got fewer. But they've been doing well this year for the most part. The trick to learning new tabletop games, I talked about how when I play a game and then come back and reread the rules make a lot more sense to me versus if I just read the rules and just try to force it real hard. But you stumble through your first game, you can usually help you kind of work on the rules. This was the first every other Sunday show where it was actually called that, with the new title card, talking about Rec Age 2nd edition. Talked about hobby deadlines. That one got some decent views. Should you be using 40K detachments? That one got some decent views. They kind of changed the rules after that. Not really, but I mean, there was like real soup in 8th edition because you could just mix all kinds of stuff together. And now they're like, your detachment needs to be kind of all the same faction keyword, but that doesn't mean that you can't have, or like sub-faction, but that doesn't mean you can't have like a detachment of Guard along with a detachment of Space Marines, because they're both Imperium, so they can be in the same overall army, they just can't be in the same detachment and stuff like that. So, which I, honestly, when I was building my lists back then at that time, I was always keeping the detachments separated myself, so when they made that change, I was like, oh yeah, I guess I was just always doing that, which was fine. What else? Yes, the Warsquire Citadel, which I haven't finished yet, but that was when I was kind of showing what it's a big piece of terrain, so that's fun. Let's see here. Why is sporting behavior surprising in wargaming? That one got some decent views. Talking about actually about the LVO, and there was a kerfuffle, and then the guy from League of Legends donated $5,000, and it was yeah. If you're interested in that, you can watch that video. It's interesting. Are you trying way too hard? That one's done very well. It's got 71,000 views, and I think that was kind of an important. If you haven't seen that one, you should try to, I don't know, hit the little save button or whatever you do and watch it later or whatever, because it's a good video talking about not pushing yourself so hard when you first start, because you're just started and you have to practice and that kind of stuff. Definitely. Immersion in wargaming, I think it's necessary, but some people may think differently. That's got 28,000 views. It's not terrible. Did a video over here about Game 4, basically. That did okay. Game 4 is the app that's my day job, is working on, well, it's working on a lot of things, but one of the things is an app that we built called Game 4. Are you motivated enough to create content, kind of like a YouTube video, or like in the example there, do you want to start a Instagram page where you show off all your miniatures that you're working on and stuff like that, try to build a following that way? We live in an interesting time when you can go through all this stuff and you can really start to build a following, and you can build, just have people interact with you in the miniature painting hobby very easily online. Did a live show about the Gamma Trade Show and what I learned about while I was there. They showed off some of the new, at the time, it was the last stuff that was going to be in Shadespire, like Magor's Fiends and the other Storm Bros. I can't remember the other army, not Wayfarers. I don't know. Anyway, so there was some stuff that they showed off there that they hadn't showed off anyplace else yet, and I got some pictures, and it was cool. How to start a game convention. You can see that people are not super interested in doing that. It's only got 7,000 views, and it's 9 months old. Talked real quick with Wargamer Girl at Adepticon. We did a quick live stream on my phone and talked about Valhalla because it had just gone into, like, they do a Kickstarter every year for it. I'm assuming they'll start another Kickstarter in around Adepticon time again this year for this year, up 2019's Valhalla, which will probably also be in, I'm assuming, October. Got a pro tip about when to use and when to not use dry brush, which I still think is an important one. And it did okay. It's got okay views. Double gateway game. Talked about games that are like, it's a video game. Like, a gateway game is a game that kind of brings people from board gaming into wargaming, and it's a sort of hybrid-y sort of game, whereas a double gateway game is that, but also has maybe like a property like in this situation in the screenshot, it's Dark Souls. So it's a video game that also brings video gamers potentially into board gaming and then sort of into wargaming, that kind of thing. Got a video with me and Terry Latorco, and it's called What's Right with Games Workshop, because she and I, years ago at Adepticon on her channel, did a video of what's wrong with Games Workshop. This is back before the new CEO and before things were going real well. And we as fans were like, this is what the problem is, and it's a bummer, and this is what we see. And then because things have gotten so good recently, and things have really kind of gotten better and increased and whatever, we decided to do a follow-up on my channel about what's right. And that was fun. TMX 2018 and some t-shirts. Why don't you start a wargaming club? It's interesting, for at least for me, I don't know about for you, but it's interesting for me to go through and look at the numbers of views and kind of glean like what people are interested in actually watching. Like anytime I kind of mention Games Workshops, it seems like the views are higher. Like here it's 41,000 views on What's Right with Games Workshop. Whereas, why don't you start a wargaming club? Well, that's 16,000, What color primer should you use? Evidently, a lot of people are interested in that. That's got 51,000 views. International Tabletop Day, did some videos about that, including a very short live stream from my local shop that basically caused my battery to die on my camera or on my phone. So next time, I now have a splitter, so I can plug a microphone in and also like a power bank, or just plug it straight into the wall so that I can keep the phone charged so it doesn't die right away while I'm trying to live stream. So we'll see. Maybe because my local shop moved to a new, better store, and their Wi-Fi got better. So I think I might try doing that a little bit more, maybe from their store soon. Talked a little bit about weird World War stuff and why it's cool. And it's because of reasons. I moved into the new studio sometime in like April, I want to say it was. So this was kind of a first thing, and then I talked about the new shirts and all that jazz. Gaming tokens, whether you should buy them or make them. Get back into airbrushing with Sam, and how to airbrush some vehicles. He showed you how to airbrush some of the cool vehicles from Wreckage, the resin like trucks and cars and stuff like that. Talked a little bit about scatter terrain, what good is it? Wreckage. Here's our first battle report. There's me and moderator Matt. That still has got about 7,000 views. Why do you play so many different mini games? That's, it's interesting to see, like, again, like sometimes some of these numbers, like the Sunday ones, because they're longer, and I don't quite know how they do it, like as far as how YouTube counts what a view is. Like if it's a 3-minute video, do you have to watch half of it before it's counted as a view, or do you only watch a third of it? And they don't really tell you that. So if it's a 2-hour video, how much of a 2-hour video do you have to watch before it's counted as a view? Anyway, scatter terrain. What else have we got? Okay, we got the battle report over here. I got lost. Okay, and then how to paint rusty orc axes, again with Sam. Should you get the new Age of Sigmar? That did pretty well as a video. Age of Sigmar Soul Wars version 2.0. The secret of my baking soda bases. That was a video that a lot of people have been looking for a long time, because I've been talking about how I had originally attempted it and it didn't work out. There's fun after credits bloopers that you can watch on that video. That's got 147,000 views since 6 months, so that's not bad. That's a pretty good one, and I hope that people have been able to use that technique and get something out of it. Then summer starts rolling around, and they start talking about Kill Team. And so who is the new Kill Team actually for? When I made it, I already actually had a copy of Kill Team because they'd sent it to me. But I couldn't say that I had a copy of Kill Team yet. So I was basically trying to make the video talking about all the stuff, the news that they had released on the Warhammer community website. So I was basically just referencing what was on that and said, oh, well, it looks like they're going to do this. And it looks like they're going to do that. But I already had the box and knew what they were going to do. So that was a little weird, but that brought in a bunch of traffic. And then the Every Other Sunday show where I talked about it and actually showed off the stuff in the box, that brought in a bunch of traffic. Well, actually, I don't think I showed off the box there. Then I did there's a thing about YouTube is that once you get a couple of videos or a video that starts to do better than other ones, if you can keep that ball rolling, I'm not saying you keep on the same subject, but if you can make a video that does well and then make another video that follows it up that's not about necessarily even the same thing, but it can be whatever, that also does well, it will start to snowball. This summer, my numbers for views were crazy high in comparison to the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, I was hoping that by the end of 2018, by right about now, I was hoping that I was going to hit 100,000 by the end of the year. Because my summer, like you start looking at some of these videos, 147,000, 71,000, 94,000, 74,000, 36,000, 39,000, 110,000. All of those videos all kind of snowballed, and then that's why I hit 100,000 videos or hit 100,000 subscribers in August instead of December, like I originally had suspected I would at the beginning of the year. So again, I want to thank everybody, and you wouldn't think that summer would be the time for a lot of people to watch videos, because they always tell you, oh, summer, everyone's outside swimming and boating, which I don't know that many people with boats, and we live 4 blocks from a lake. So, but that's always the case. Oh, summer, people are always doing summer stuff and they don't watch videos. For the last 2 summers in a row, had really good summers as far as views are concerned. So I think that maybe that may not be true. Anyway, so yeah, 4K or 40K Kill Team lists for hobby heroes, Kill Team play impressions, the importance of painting light on your miniatures, which I still like that video. I think I think that's important information. I think there's a lot of people that don't realize that you need to sort of paint in the highlights and the shadows. They just assume that the normal light in the room is going to do the job, but because they're so small, it's a necessity. Talked about how to cheat on texturing your bases, which I thought would do a little better. The easy Kill Team lists for under $50. I mean, that kind of seems simple as far as like, yeah, people are going to watch that. People like to get a good deal. Kill Team was still pretty new. It worked out pretty well. Yeah, so right here is the thanks for watching video where I hit 100,000. That was cool. That was in, like I said, I think it was in mid-August or so. Talking about campaign snowball effects. A lot of campaigns, once one team starts to win, they can just kind of sometimes keep winning, and how do you fix that? How to safely transport your miniatures. I talked about foam cases and magnets and all kinds of cool stuff. Talking before about the kind of night haunt, sort of spooky boy, sort of floating ghost folks. They work way better on magnets than trying to fit them in foam, frankly, because they are a little bit more fragile. Test drive colors before painting using different computer programs to kind of like pre-draw the colors onto your black and white models so you can see what it looks like if you make them red versus blue versus whatever, that kind of stuff. That did okay. How to properly drill your barrels. I kind of thought that was a video that would be like, well, I just assumed everybody would know, but it worked out pretty well. Planning to customize your Kill Team minis. That was me showing a couple different things that I'd customized as far as in my current kill team lists and things like that, like the models themselves. And that did okay. And we've got are you using enough terrain? How to get kids into wargaming. Talked about games like Space Marine Adventures and Blitz Bowl and things like that. Are you mediocre at your hobby? That was about that story. It was an article that was written about being mediocre at your hobby and how it was okay, and you don't have to be a pro at everything that you try. And that got some decent views. I think a lot of times, sometimes these things get decent views because people share them. You know, you see a video and you're like, yeah, that really strikes home. And me and Bob were just talking about that, so I'll share it with Bob so he can watch it, and then he'll be like, oh yeah, no, I feel better about it now. That kind of stuff, you know. Then there was the release of Commanders for Kill Team and what that's going on there. Is Warhammer like pop music? I still kind of enjoyed that video. I just think that maybe it was a... I think it makes more sense to me maybe than it makes to other people, but that's fine. My biggest wargaming regrets. That video did quite well. That's 78,000 views already. I think there's something to be said, and I don't like it, but it's there. Negativity brings viewers in YouTube. If I so a regret is generally negative. So when you say my biggest wargaming regrets, I was talking about here are some regrets and how to learn from them, but psychologically just we generally go, that'll be juicy or whatever. I don't know, but there's something about conflict and negativity in YouTube that makes it so that it is, I don't know. There's just people that it just seems to be a lot of views, and I don't like to go that way. I generally like to keep the channel positive. So it's potentially to my detriment to not make, you know, drama videos or conflict or whatever, but I just don't want to do it. I don't want that in wargaming. There's enough of that out there already, so I ignore that stuff. But when I did this video, I thought to myself, I was like, well, it'll be interesting to see whether this does what I think it does or not, and it kind of did. So, but I also don't try to do clickbait at all, but there are times you still want a provocative. I mean, the title and the thumbnail are super important in these videos about getting people to click and come through. So there are times when I'm like, I think that I could probably say this one thing that would be probably true about the video, but it would bring in a lot more clicks, but I don't want to I don't like the clickbait. So, but really this wasn't clickbait in my opinion. So, how to make sure you're not that guy. I think that's an important message. Again, probably a touch provocative in that people are like, you know. The other thing I've noticed too is that if I talk about a very specific game or if I talk about a very specific painting technique, there are people out there that are like, well, I'm not playing that game or I'm not painting in that way, so they don't watch the video, which is totally fine. But if I talk about a little bit more of the philosophical stuff or things that apply to all gaming, they have a tendency to work a little bit better. All wargaming, you know, that kind of thing. So how to make sure you're not that guy. Everybody knows that guy. You know what I mean? So that video worked out pretty well. Here's our most recent video with Sam. We've got Painting with the Pro, Secrets to Layers and Blending, which is also, again, a bit of a wet blending sort of thing. So you could check that one out. He's working on a Wreckage model. Are you getting into the hobby too fast? A lot of people seem to like that video too because it was... I was just basically telling people, like, don't go out and just buy a whole bunch of junk. And, you know, because people do that. I did that many times. It just makes sense to sometimes kind of ease into it a little bit more and you feel better about it. What else have we got here? And then how to properly use washes, also from Sam. The worst habit that a wargamer can have. I thought that was a decent video and it did okay. Blackstone Fortress minis for Kill Team, which I'm actually just about to, probably today, I'll probably start working on a couple of those to get those ready to go for my Kill Team. Single player games. I had a lot of people asking, actually, in Sunday show about single player games, and so I did a bit of research and realized that I actually already owned several games that could be played single player. And so I made a video about that and then told people, you know, put in the comments below about what kind of stuff you could do. Other kind of single player games. How to best pick your terrain colors. That was last week's video about kind of, like I said, blending everything together to making it look like there's dust that's fallen on ruined stuff, that kind of thing. Kind of making it so that the terrain is a little bit more muted so that your models kind of pop out a little bit more. And then my video from 2 days ago, what I want from Games Workshop 2019, which is a follow-up to my 2017 video of roughly the same thing. And that video's done pretty well. 38,000 in 2 days, that's not bad at all. Which I kind of, again, if you talk about Games Workshop, I've noticed that generally views kind of, spike. So, okay, I hope that wasn't too boring, but that was pretty much the videos that I've done over the last, the last year, and kind of what's out there, things I've been working on. So let's see. I've been not actually able to see the chat for quite some time now because that screen was taking up everything else. One of these days I'm going to get 2 monitors, and then it'll be confusing. Randall says, please don't make drama videos. Yeah, no, there's not any chance of that, so it's fine. Let me see there. People having a good conversation. Matthew Sears says, look at the ethics on this guy. I don't think it's ethics. I honestly think it's... long-term success, for lack of a better word. There's a lot of short-term success to be had for, like, if there's some new thing that happened in the news about wargaming and making a video about it and gossip and, oh my goodness, this company did this or they're getting sued or whatever, that kind of thing. There's some benefit to doing that, views-wise. But nobody gives a crap about that video in 2 years. You know what I mean? Nobody gives a crap about that video in 3 years. But yet you can still go back and watch videos I did 5 years ago about wet palette, and they still get plenty of views, and they still do well, and they still help people with their painting. And that's what they call evergreen. So making a video that will hopefully make a lot more sense, or make as much sense in 5 years as it does today, is good. Whereas focusing on gossip and things that just happened and whatnot, at least for me, is not. I don't want to go that direction because I'm planning on doing this long haul. So, doing that kind of gossipy stuff can also turn off certain people to the channel. It can make all kinds of problems, over time, especially. You've seen that. There's been plenty of talk recently about celebrities who tweeted something like 6 years ago, and then they can't work at this thing or whatever anymore, and that kind of stuff. And so I just don't want to go that direction. Ethics, yeah, fine. I like to be ethical, don't get me wrong, but it's also just a overall good plan for the channel, in my opinion. People talking about working out. Well, that's a good idea. I should do more of that. Jez Hunt says, I like your generally positive approach to things. Don't go cheap, or you don't go cheap and bitchy. It's easy to moan, but it doesn't make life or games better. No, that's true. I appreciate that. That's a good idea. Good point. VJ Morph says, 2 monitors will change your life. I can't go back now. I generally use 2 monitors at work. I'm a fan of it. It's just where I'm currently at. And like when I, hopefully soon, when I move all this shenanigans, not to no longer sadly be here in the dining room, but to be probably in the basement for my live streaming stuff, then I will have 2 monitors and go that direction and all that stuff. Let me see here. What else have we got? Video idea. I put googly eyes in my wife's cello case, and this is what happened. That's this video, and almost every video I've done this year. Jack Nickelberg says, what do you suggest for a new Drukhari army, strategically speaking? I don't know anything about the Drukhari, and I'm also a terrible strategist. So that is possibly... I am the worst person to ask that question. So I apologize for that. But I don't know jack about dark elves, and I am not a strategic player. I'm a much better painter than I'm a player, and I'm not that great of a painter. I'm not bad. I'm okay. But yeah, so I can't help you with that. Sorry. Ari says, Uncle Adam, one of the reasons I enjoy your channel is that you are not clickbait/drama. You might get more views with clickbait, but I think that the way you work makes the views more meaningful. Well, I appreciate that. I agree. It's the same kind of thing. So yeah, that's the same type of. It is the case. I think that it's. you get more flies with honey. Well, let's just say that. I don't know if that's actually super. I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to say here, but it sounds like the right thing to say. So close enough. Ernie says, if there was one thing I learned from Tabletop Minions is being consistent with my hobby. Uncle Adam is a good example. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I hear from people all the time who are like, oh, I haven't painted in 4 months, or I haven't hobbied in 3 months. And you know, obviously there are times when stuff gets in the way. Health, you know, like there's an illness or a family illness or family, you know, there's things, jobs sometimes. But if you can try to, like I have found when things go poorly with either a job or family, you know, or something like that. Like when my dad passed away back in August of 2017, like I did a bunch of hobby around that time because it was stress relieving and calming, and I needed to just like sit in the basement and work with my hands and, you know, that kind of stuff and do some things, and focus on something else. And so that kind of stuff, I think if you can make it, you know, building habits is super important. Me doing videos every Friday, like I haven't missed one in 3 years. When I first started the habit, I decided, hey, I should do videos every Friday. And then I haven't missed one in 3 years. Building that habit is the way that you kind of get better at things, you know. Eating better, you have to make it a habit. Otherwise, you do the yo-yo thing. Exercising, it has to become a habit. It has to become something, not something you're like, oh, I got to do it, but it's just something that you just don't, it's difficult to not do because it's become a habit. That's what I've been told. And so for me, hobby has become a habit. There are times when maybe like right now, I haven't been down in the basement to do any modeling. Has it been a week? I mean, Christmas. That's partially because I'm gone a lot, you know, and it's traveling and all that jazz. But I'm going to be today, so you know that'll break that back in, you know, get it back into. But it's not been like ever months. No, like not for a long time for me has it ever been. Oh, it's been months since I've done any modeling or hobbying or whatever. So making it a habit, I think, is important. It helps you long term with your goals. Joshua says, I just got my first airbrush. Any suggestions on starting? It's a little daunting. Start with just trying it out like on a piece of cardboard or a plastic plate. Maybe not like one that you eat off of, but like, you know, disposable one. Yeah, something like that I think is a good idea because you can kind of start to get used to like, okay, like first of all, definitely like slowly take it apart. And maybe, like, if your memory is complete garbage like mine, maybe take some pictures. Like, as you get to use it more and more, you won't need to look at the pictures anymore. It'll just be like, oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I know exactly how this goes together and comes apart. But when you first start, maybe like, okay, so here's what, and then I take this part off, and let me take a picture of that. And then there's this part. Like, take a picture so that when you need to put it back together after you've cleaned it, and you're like, I don't remember where this part goes, you can go look at the pictures. Like, and by pictures, I mean use your phone. I mean, you may have bought an airbrush that actually has a diagram inside that says where all the parts are. Awesome. That'd be great too. But if you didn't, shoot some pictures and take care of that. Start out just shooting water onto your hand, honestly. Just put some water in the cup and just spray it onto your hand and get kind of used to that. What the heck is on my hand? That was strange. But yeah, do some of that. It's not airbrush, but do something like that, and then move to putting in a little bit of paint, spraying it onto a piece of cardboard, spraying it onto some stuff. Get used to it that way. Like I wouldn't be like, okay, this is my first. I've got my new airbrush, and I'm going to spray a model because I got to get this model done, or I want to. That's. I would start by just spraying on some scrap cardboard, or like I said, like a paper plate or whatever, I don't know, something like that. So that's a good idea. Clinton asks, airbrush primer preference. I would say the two best are probably Vallejo. They call it Surface Primer, but it's basically their airbrush primer. And Badger's Stynel Res. Both of them come in tons of different colors now. It used to be only like black and white, and then like gray. And now it's like bone color, military green, silver primer, like all kinds. Both of those companies have cranked out a whole different bunch of... And the big benefit to having colored primer is that you can very frequently prime and base coat and save yourself a step. So if I was painting an Imperial Knight and all of the linkage and all the junk that's underneath their armor plates, I needed to prime that. If I used a silver primer, I now have primed it and also made it silver all in one step instead of having to prime it black and then spray paint it silver or something like that, which is 2 steps. So yeah, that kind of stuff that's a good idea. But yeah, those two, I think those two are about the best, and everybody's got their own thing. I've used both of them. So Michael Strange, do you have a Pachow count for the year? I don't. I would have to go through every video and figure that out. Like, there's not. I mean, if I would have had like a thing and just made a check mark every time that I made a Pachow, then I would know that number. But I haven't. I did not think to track that. That's an analytic that sadly I don't think I can just get from YouTube. One of the few I cannot get from YouTube. Carl O'Toole says, practice airbrushing on an old picture frame or mirror. Just clean it off with a blade and repeat. Well, that's a good idea. Just spray on a piece of glass, and then you can just take a razor blade and just kind of scrape off the paint, and then do it again. That's not a bad idea. Yeah, absolutely. Adron says, I started spraying on some old toys, like from Happy Meals, etc., for a mini like surface without ruining everything. That's also a good idea. Take yourself like I've told people to get those green army men, like from the grocery store. Like there's a little kind of weird toy area at the grocery store sometimes, at least around here. And there's frequently like cheap little green army men. You prime those and then try airbrushing them and painting on them and that kind of stuff. They're like not a bad, like you can use bones too, Reaper bones, but they're even still like $3 or $4 a model, whereas usually for like $5 or $6 you can get a bag of little army men. So you could try that too. Sam Hinchy asks, can you brush on Vallejo surface primer? I mean, physically, yes. Like you could actually just dip your brush in and put it on. How well it will work, that I don't know. I've never tried it. The only brush-on primer I've ever used has been Reaper. Years ago, I bought like 3 or 4 bottles of their black brush-on primer and probably the same number of bottles of their white brush-on primer. I rarely use the black. What I generally use the white brush-on primer for is if I'm painting a model that I want to have a Caucasian face, but I've started off by spraying them all dark blue, like maybe it's like an ultramarine, let's say, but he's a sergeant with his helmet off. So I've sprayed him all dark blue for his armor. That's my base, prime and also base color. But now I need to paint his face. Well, putting flesh tone directly over dark blue is going to suck. So what I do instead is I throw white primer on all the skin parts there, let that totally dry, then start working my flesh tones based off of that, because then I'm not having to try to muddy up flesh tones. Like that white primer you're going to put over his dark blue face is going to look weird, but then when you put the first flesh tone kind of base color over it, it will work okay. Whereas if you went flesh tone first, it would look real weird, and then you have to kind of build up more layers. So that's the only time I ever use brush-on primer for the most part. And this, like I said, the stuff I use is, I think, made by Reaper. They probably still make it. It's just called brush-on primer. But, I mean, you could try it. I don't know why it wouldn't work. There's maybe a science reason why it wouldn't work, but I don't know what that would be. What else? GW building instructions are looking more and more like Lego manuals. Malifaux are download only, and Mantic are non-existent. What's your preference? I mean, I like a good manual that explains how things go together. I generally prefer that, especially like when the models get more detailed. I'm gonna just turn this. I'm getting like too much. It got bright outside all of a sudden. When the models get too detailed, not too detailed, that's a strong word. When they get more detailed, then it becomes an issue. And when there's lots and lots of parts. The other thing too is you're seeing specifically with Games Workshop, they have a lot of models that are very customizable. If you look at the kit for, let's say, the Putrid Blight Kings for the Age of Sigmar line, there's enough parts in there to make 5 models, but you could take 2 boxes and build each box completely differently and get 10 completely different looking models out of the same box because they're so customizable. They're still like monopose, you know what I mean? Like you can't say, well, I want the arm to go like this as opposed to like this. But like, this bottom part will attach to a different torso, which will do to this and then that, and then you can change this weapon because the hand can be modified. And so they are very customizable. So you could make an entire, like I've got 5 painted, I think 5 or 6, I think 5. But like the next group of 5 that I do for my Future Blight Kings will look very, very, very different, and it will just be following the instructions and going, I think I'm going to do this instead of that kind of thing. It's going to work out well. So I like that. What brands of paint do you prefer? I'm having some issues with the Army Painter line as it comes out like a gel and is harder to mix the medium and pigment. I haven't had that trouble with Army Painter, but generally the main 2 that I use right now are Vallejo. I'm a big fan of Vallejo. Citadel, I love the washes. The standard washes I love. I do generally still use Citadels on and off for dry brushing. It's just very convenient to be able to dip into the pot and then rub most of it off on a piece of paper towel and then do my dry brushing. But the majority of my paints seem to be Vallejo these days. Some Reaper here and there, and some Army Painter. I think that I've never used Warcolor, I think it's called. I've never used any of their paints, so I don't know anything about them. But there's other companies out there too, but those are the main companies that I generally use. Let's see. Horns fan says, my Iowata came with a test line on paper that changed from a thick to a thin, delicate line. It showed me what the airbrush can do, and I've tried to practice with thin versus thick lines as a result. That's a good idea. I mean, definitely trying to practice on the different thicknesses and stuff like that. Like if you're just mainly using the airbrush to start and you want to use it for priming and base coating, that you should be able to do that easy. It's when you want to start getting into, I just want to put some highlight on this shoulder, but not on, the entire arm and the side of his head or whatever. That kind of stuff, where you need to have very tight control. There are people that say that they can airbrush eyeballs. They're probably not lying. I'm sure that there are out there. There's, also LeBron James, who's very, 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 very good at basketball. There are people out there who are very, very skilled. Most people don't airbrush eyeballs, just like most people don't drain threes that's all the basketball that I really know. But yeah, so start out, don't be like, oh, I got to use this airbrush for everything now. Honestly, just start priming, base coating, eventually getting to some highlighting, even if it's just simple zenithal kind of top-down highlighting. When you want to start getting real fancy and putting a little bit of shade on this part, a little bit of shade on that part, you can do it. But there's always a time, for me at least, where I'm airbrushing, and then, okay, now I have to get into detail. And then I go in, I start doing like actual, brush, and I'm painting, metallics, or I'm painting washes and stuff like that. Like, I'm not telling you to not airbrush washes. I'm telling you that if you airbrush washes, they won't work like you think they will. Airbrushing washes is a super fine transparent, like if you want to make things darker, but it won't really seep into like crevices and stuff like that when you use it, like it does when you use a brush. Airbrushes don't, like when you use a wash, like I've tried it on terrain, I'm like, oh, I'll just put a bunch of wash on this terrain. With my airbrush, I can put it on in a wider area quicker. That's not how it works. It comes across and it dries very quickly, so it doesn't seep into the crevices. If you want stuff to seep into crevices as a wash, you just have to put it on with a brush. If you do it really, really super wet with your airbrush, it hopes then it makes more of a mess than you probably generally want to, so you've got that problem as well. What else have we got? Adam, what are your thoughts on the Gloomspite Gits? I've seen some pictures. They look cool. I like the fact that they're kind of bringing back some of those Night Goblin type dudes. I don't know anything about the lore or the rules, but I'm glad that they're bringing them in as it was cool to see them as a Night Vault army or crew or whatever, warband, and the fact that they were going to bring them in as regular models now in Age of Sigmar is cool, but I don't really know a ton about them. James asks, do you varnish your models? If so, does matte mess up metallics? I've never seen that happen. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm saying that maybe I've just not paid close enough attention in the past. Who was it? Vince Venturella did a video recently talking about how and he was talking about AK Interactive's Ultra Matte Varnish. And he was talking about how much he likes it, which is great, and I like it too. But he was saying that what he likes to do is he uses it on the model, and then once he's done, then he will paint the metallic parts of the model because he doesn't want to put matte over the metallics because it takes away some of the shine, which I guess I had never thought of. But it kind of makes sense now that he kind of mentioned it. Like there have been times in the past where I've used dull coat on a model and I've been like, hey, cool, but I'm like, now all of a sudden the sword doesn't look quite as shiny as it did. And so that makes kind of some sense. So, but yeah, I do generally varnish my models because they are something I'm going to play with. Like I'm going to be touching them a lot. If it was a display piece, from what I understand, you generally don't varnish too much on display pieces because you're not going to be fondling them too much, so you don't need to. And it can also kind of deaden metallics and things like that. But yeah, so I generally do varnish, and I might try varnishing and then doing the metallics in the future and see what I think about it. I mean, I don't know. It depends. Like, there's certain things, like, if it's a gun and I'm using metallics on it, I don't know. If I'm trying to make it look beat up, then I don't want it to be too shiny, and I get that. But if it's a shiny sword from a, knight in shining armor, very clean cut kind of dude, that makes sense. If it's a goblin who's waving a sword that he found around, then it should be grungy looking, and to be too metallic and too shiny would not make sense in that situation. It should be kind of rusty and grungy. So it, again, depends on the situation, as do most things in life. Ernie Jr. says, what do you think about using stencils on your models? Been thinking of getting a few. Any suggestions? Fallout Hobbies makes a great line of stencils for vehicles. They also make a smaller line of stencils. If you like, I own some of their camo stencils. The only time I really ever use stencils are either for trying to make some sort of kind of cool camouflage, number one, or number two, if I am trying to put like a number on the side of a piece of terrain, like here is some sort of fuel tank and I need to put number 4 on it so that it's fuel tank number 4, then it makes sense to use those. Generally, otherwise I kind of don't too much. But for those things, like if you want to have like a creature that's got like speckles on it, then you can do some really cool stuff with some of those airbrush stencils. There's two main types of airbrush stencils I've found. There's the kind that are made out of a flexible kind of plastic, but it's not adhesive in any way. It's just a piece of flexible plastic, thin flexible plastic, and you lay it up against the thing that you want. Let's say you want to put speckles on the hind rump or whatever of a horse to make it look like an Appaloosa or something like that. So you've painted your horse white, now you're going to put some brown speckles back there. And you would lay that down on there and kind of just spritz and be very careful with your airbrush, but you don't want to move it too much because it will screw everything up. But those work okay. And then there's also another type of stencil, which are basically lightly adhesive. So it's like a sticker you have to peel, and you stick it on the thing, and then you kind of press it down, and it will just stay there, and then you can spray and then peel it off. And usually those will allow you to do it. Like, it's kind of like a Post-it note. It's repositionable. You can use that stuff over and over again, but only up to a point. Like, eventually they will wear out. The stickiness will wear out, or something will eventually rip, or whatever, or you'll have too much paint on it, it'll become too thick. I don't know. But they're also not crazy expensive either. And it depends, if you are doing it as a business and you constantly crank out more and more of these models, you may get better return on investment with the non-sticky kind of stencils. But to be honest, you need to figure out in some situation probably a way to kind of affix the non-sticky stencil to the model. Maybe it's use a little bit of poster tack like on the edges where you're not going to be spraying any paint so that it won't move around. Because if you're just holding it against the model and trying to spray, if you're spraying for any more than a couple of seconds, your hand is going to move because you're not made out of steel. You're not a tripod or something like that. You're wiggly a little bit. We're all kind of wiggly all the time. And so that's something to think about. But yeah, the two main types of stencils for airbrushing are the sticky kind and the non-sticky kind. And the sticky kind, my favorite ones are Fallout Hobbies. If you look them up online, you can find them. They do good work. So yeah. Alrighty. What else? Adam, are there any issues with using multiple brands of paints on a model? I've never seen that. No, I don't think. I've never come across. a model where like because I used some Citadel and some Vallejo, they like the paints somehow like reacted against each other in some fashion, whether it was a chemical thing or whatever. I've never had that issue, so no, that's not a thing. At least not that I've seen. Let me see what else we had. Oh, geez, we're at 11 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody for coming to today's video. I want to thank everyone for watching over the course of 2018. It's been a great year. Yeah, a lot of views. Hit 100,000 subscribers. Again, thank you to everybody who subscribes. And I'm going to keep making the videos. I'm going to keep doing these Sundays. I'm going to be starting to travel starting in February. I'll be at the Las Vegas Open. And so I'll have to figure out whether or not I'll need to change the schedule. My plan is in the future, if I need to change the schedule of the Every Other Sunday show because I'm going to be traveling, because I have tried multiple times to do an Every Other Sunday show from the road and every time have failed. But if I have to do that, then what I'll do is to switch up the weeks, I'll do 2 in a row as opposed to having 3 weeks off. I don't want to do that. I'll just do 2 in a row and then go with a new thing. But I need to sit down and look at the calendar because between LVO, the Gamma Trade Show in Reno, Adepticon, that kind of stuff, I need to kind of figure out my stuff. But I'm going to try to make it so there's more. There's be more Sunday shows, maybe back to back, just to make the thing fit. But we'll see how it works out. Anyway. I hope the rest of you have a good day. I hope everyone get some hobby done and that kind of stuff. And have a good, happy and safe new year. And we'll see you in 2 weeks here at the Every Other Sunday show.